Hi, I'm Michael with Thrive and Grow Gardens. Welcome to my channel. The next issue that I see all the time with new planted trees is emitter placement. And we can see here where the emitters are around this tree. This one is basically right up against the trunk of the tree. We do have one more here and one more here. And if we dig around, maybe we can find a couple others. Here's a couple. I actually don't mind the placement of these ones here, but this right up against the tree is really an issue. This part of the root zone of the tree, it's actually called the root crown. These are not feeder roots that are right here at the root crown. This is an area that we actually don't want to have a lot of moisture. So we want to be watering further out. This placement here, if you imagine that when it waters here, you get a wetting pattern where that water spreads out. It's going to water far enough into the root crown, but not too much. And our other goal, other than not watering too close to the trunk of the tree, is to make sure that we water far enough out. So think about this. Whenever you plant a new tree, it has a lot of growing to do. So we want to be thinking about where are those roots headed towards. We're expecting expansion of this tree. The roots that we're trying to water are at least out to the drip line of the tree. And realistically, they're pushing their way out further. So we want to make sure to accommodate that and encourage that expanded growth of the root system. And what I find is that trees that are watered for the first several years of their life, really just close to the trunk of the tree, they have a lot of difficulty expanding, and they kind of get a failure to thrive. So what we really want to accomplish is watering further out and making sure that we're encouraging that expansion of the root zone. So these other emitters are, we can get them placed at around this maybe 1.5 feet from the tree, something like that. And these are going to water for long enough that they'll have plenty of opportunity for that wetting pattern to really spread out. So what we just have to decide is how we want to add some additional expansion. I think I'm going to add 4 additional emitters to this tree, and they're going to be spaced out around kind of the outer perimeter of the existing tree canopy, that drip edge of the tree. So there's a couple ways to do this. You can see how it was done here. They just tapped directly into this main line with these 5 emitters, and then they ran micro tubing out a little ways. That's okay, we can do it that way. One word of caution is don't run micro tubing more than 10 feet because you start really losing flow. There's just too much pressure loss, friction loss through this small tubing. We're not gonna really run too much of a risk of running more than 10 feet, so that's fine. We could just continue along exactly the same way that they did it here and just tap in the additional 4 into this line. The way I really prefer to do it is using a method called a J-loop. And the way that works is we take our poly tubing using the 0.710 poly tubing. Don't use the 0.700 stuff, it's too thin of a wall. So we take that 0.710 poly tubing and tap it into the existing line, which is about right in here, and create a J around the tree. And that gives us a supply line all the way around, and anywhere we want emitters, we can just put in emitter and a little bit of micro tubing, all around. So that's my preferred method. And so I'm just debating whether I would want to go ahead and add that J-loop here. It actually might be nice for future expansion. All we would need to do is put a T in here, expose this line. See where it is here, install a T in this spot and connect this in here, run it around like a J over to about right here where I'm holding the line here, cut it, and put a cap. I think I'll go ahead and do it that way. You know, I don't know that there's any good reason to replace these ones the way they are. They're pretty new. Anywhere there was a emitter tapped into this line, you go putting a goof plug in there, it's gonna leak in that spot. It's kind of unavoidable. This isn't the worst spot for it to leak, it's right in the root zone of the plant, but I don't see any good reason really to remove them. So we'll go ahead and add in the J-loop, that'll make me happy. Regarding future expansion, it'll just make it really easy to add additional emitters as this tree gets a lot bigger. So I think it's a good solution here, and we'll be nearing completion of this little project. What do you think, Petey? You're the expert. That's true. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. That's really good for this. And then this one can be over here. This was that 5th one that was right up against the trunk. So we'll put this one in the growth path, about right here. Go. That'll all get covered up with mulch. So now we can go ahead and put in our J-loop here. So the J-loop will go in about right here. When you're installing these, you don't want to twist, you want to rock back and forth. And that makes it go real easily. If you twist, it never goes anywhere. And then line up, figure out where we're going to need to cut it. To actually remove a section for a T. And then again, you just rock it on. And try and gauge about how far we want to go in. If we go all the way in, it'll block the water. So we want to go about to here. You can even kind of mark it a little bit. And then just rock it back and forth. This takes less strength than you think. If you just rock it back and forth, it goes in pretty easily. Great. So, a J-loop, as you might imagine, is shaped like a J. So we can cap it right here and go ahead and add in our flush cap. Flush cap is really nice because it allows us to flush the end of this line. Anytime you install a new line, you want to go ahead and flush that out when you run it. That way you don't run dirt through your emitters. So you just twist this off and you can flush it there. These landscape staples help to keep things put into place. This is actually holding basically where we want it. It's not totally necessary, but we're gonna end up spreading some mulch around in here, so that'll keep it in place. And all of this will get covered with mulch. These existing irrigation lines, I normally bury them a little bit deeper, but they'll get covered with mulch. They'll be protected from the sun. And they only have water in them when it runs, which is early in the morning. In the wintertime, we make sure we make a change to our watering system where it waters a little bit later in the day so that it's not running while it's freezing. And these lines will be fine. Right, so now that we have this J-loop, we can run any additional emitters off of that we need. When you're first installing a tree, let's say it's an even smaller tree, like a 5-gallon tree. This was probably a 15-gallon tree when it was installed. When you're installing a 5-gallon tree, you could run your J-loop and run emitters with goof plugs in the end for future expansion. And then down the road, all you have to do when the tree is big enough to need those, just pull off the goof plugs, and then it makes that future expansion really easy. So we have 4 emitters in a good distance from the tree. We already have one that's coming out here. You can see it's past the drip line, so it's aiding us in that future expansion. And then we'll do the same thing over on this corner, that corner, and that corner. So like 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock, essentially, just all the way around. We'll add that one additional emitter. They're all 2-gallon emitters, and then we can add up the number of emitters that we have, which is going to be 8, which 8 emitters at 2 gallons apiece. That's 16 gallons an hour. So then we know how much water we're giving this, and that comes in really handy when we're programming our controller. There is a publication for this region, for Tucson, through the Agricultural Extension Agency. We'll post the link in the description, and has a couple of really great charts that show you, based on the size of the tree, the age of it, and basically the size of the canopy, how many gallons of water the tree should be getting and how often it should be receiving that. So that 16 gallons per hour, we could just apply that to the chart. And so let's say that we need 30 gallons at one time, then we need to run this for roughly 2 hours. So that's all the information that you need to know how to properly water. And if you're in a different region, check with your local agricultural extension and see if they have some information about how much water you should be giving a citrus tree throughout the year. So we're at that point of just sort of tidying this up. We'll add in the rest of these emitters, we'll add in the mulch. We're actually gonna put in some worm castings into here as well, give it a little fertilizer. This September is our last fertilizing opportunity for citrus trees. So I hope this has been helpful to you, and that you can find ways to apply some of these principles that we discussed today in other parts of your landscape, not just with your citrus trees, but with other trees as well. So like I said, everybody installs some of these irrigation parts a little bit differently, but let me give you a few tips that I think make a difference. So first of all, I don't like to put the emitters directly into the poly tubing. I actually like to give them a little bit of a distance from it. And this, I think, especially matters when this is buried. Now, it's going to be under mulch. This is pretty easy to uncover. But in future installations, if you're doing something where this poly tubing is actually buried, it's helpful to put a little length of the micro tubing, then the emitter, and then another piece of the micro tubing. I'll show you how to do it. Now, make sure that the barbed end goes in. That's the flow direction. And if you put it in the other way, then it doesn't actually reduce it to 2 gallons per minute. So we're going to make our little hole, and I like to use this type of punch because it has a very small end of this little punch needle. Now, the key here to get as little of a leak as possible is to only go in until it just pops. There. If you push all the way in, because it's tapered, it makes a bigger hole, and that bigger hole means that you'll get a little bit of a leak around this. Now, I don't really mind if this one's leaking a little bit right here because it's watering the tree. However, that does matter in some instances where you're running the microtubing a little distance before you are actually applying water. So I've got my little barbed elbow here, and it's a little more difficult to put in if you make a smaller hole, but it does mean not having as much of a leak right here where it goes in. So I can cut this and place this. So what this does, again, if this tube is buried, what this does is it makes it to where if we ever need to replace this, it's easier to get to, and we don't have to pull this out, which causes a leak in this point. If we ever need to replace the emitter, we can just cut it off and put a new emitter into place. And then if you have these above ground, like you will for some plants, having an additional piece of microtubing protects it from little critters coming and chewing on it. This will be covered in mulch, doesn't really matter here, but if you have it above ground, you might get rabbits coming in attracted to the water and sort of drinking out of it. So I'm just sort of looking at where the drip line is, and it's actually out to about right here. So I'm gonna bring this a little bit further out and place this emitter out here, and we can pin it into place. Then we're going to do the same thing around those other 2 points of the tree, and we'll be done with the irrigation part of this project. As always, thanks so much for following along. I hope you're enjoying these videos and getting a lot out of them, and I'll see you on the next one.